You weren't just going to buy a few shares in it and maybe sell them in a little bit. It's a company that you're going to sink a lot of money into, and you want to know more about what it does. You want to know more than just its past price and the dips and growth of the company over the last 5 years. You want to actually know how healthy their business is, not what they're trading at, right? So to give you a visual example, when you go onto your MarketWatch game and you see this graph and it has like 1 year, 2 year, and on, what that represents is what the company is trading at, right? It's market cap. Trevor, what's the market capitalization mean? Market cap. Anybody remember that vocabulary word? It is market capitalization. It's what the market, the stock market, the people on the stock market are willing to pay for a share of the company times the amount of shares there are. It's what the market thinks the company's worth overall, right? What you pay for a share on a given day, right? It's a share times the number of shares. And that tells you what the market thinks a company's worth. But you might also want to know what a company thinks a company is worth. What do they own and what do they owe to other people? So we're going to focus on one of the three things. But to go over the three things, there are the corporate income statements. How much money did we make this year, right? A company such as Google will issue a quarterly earnings report or an annual earnings report, and it comes with an income statement. This is how much money we made this year. It's a kind of line-by-line inventory of how much money they made, right? Then there's also the corporate balance sheet. That's how much we own and how much we owe. And then there's also what most people kind of invest with, especially when they first start or they get interested in a company. It's their gut or your senses. It's what you see around you in your environment. Are a lot of people wearing these shoes? Do I see a lot of people playing this game? Is this product catching on? We're going to focus on balance sheets today. A balance sheet takes a look at three things. Assets. These are things that you own. Liabilities. These are things that you owe to other people. Money that you owe to other people. And equity, which is sort of what's left over. It's what you can buy and sell on the stock market for a publicly traded company. Equity. That's what you're buying and selling. So actually, equity equals assets subtract liabilities. And we will look at that in a moment. I see some pens moving. That's good. I'm going to wait for a minute to transition. Does anybody have any questions really quickly? Sure.
This tells you what the balance sheet takes a look at, but what does it help you do?
A balance sheet is important because if you notice, maybe there are a lot of liabilities and you're taking a look at the balance sheet over a historic period, maybe 5 years, and you notice a growth of liabilities and a decrease in equity, or a growth in assets, but not a growth in equity, those are sort of concerns. Those are trends that the market cap doesn't really tell us. The market cap tells us how much people think the company's worth every day in the market. Whereas this kind of takes a structural look at how a company is structured. How much debt do they have? How do they own? And how do they turn that into a profit? Okay? Does everybody understand that definition, essentially? This is not what an actual balance sheet looks like. I will stress that. This is a visualization. An actual balance sheet is something that we will take a look at. It's sort of a list, a line item list of things. But this is a way to visualize it. Your assets are over here. All the stuff you own on the left. Think of it. Everything you need to run your company. Your liabilities, everything you owe on this side. And when you compare these two, the difference is the equity. So equity equals assets subtract liabilities, right? And what color do we usually see things you owe on a balance sheet? It's in the red. You're in the red, right? So think of that liabilities as you're in the red. So let's take a look at assets. Let's take a look at assets and see what are the different types of things that companies can consider that they own. And essentially, assets are anything that a company owns that's needed to run its business. I'm going to continue using the example of a company. What's that company? Does everybody know what that is? Yes. That's brand awareness. That's an asset. So it's right away, I'm suggesting what? That assets are both stuff you can and stuff you can't. Yes? Yeah, exactly. So let's take a deeper look. I see pens moving still, so I will wait. There are three kinds of assets. The first one is called the fixed assets. Fixed assets are tangible. They're physical. They're things you can touch, right? Fixed assets are sort of the things that don't go away in a company. You need to have them, right? Usually on a balance sheet, they're described as plant or property, plant, and equipment, right? Here, the Krispy Kreme plant, I'm assuming, the Krispy Kreme property, storefronts, and the Krispy Kreme equipment, right? You take these three things and you think of any large consumer discretionary product or consumer staple product, anything that we consider that we buy physically, it involves typically these three aspects. I chose Krispy Kreme because it's a very clear example. The property is the place where it's merchandised. Obviously, Reese's don't own Reese's stores. But this is an easy visualization. Yes? Intangible assets. Things you cannot touch. This is the Krispy Kreme logo. This is the trademark.
For that to be an intangible asset, wouldn't they have to get like a copyright or, like you said, trademark to make it to where nobody else can steal it.
Yeah, that is exactly right. You need to actually go through the process of registering your logo and apply for a trademark or your product and apply for a copyright or a patent. Yeah.
So, like when companies like go under or like stuff like that, they have to pay and they have to pay people back. They sell off their assets. How do you sell away like your copyrights or like your patents and stuff like that?
That's a really good question. It might not seem evident that that's profitable, but it happens quite a lot, and you might not realize it. Let's say that a brand is doing very well. It's a well-liked brand. Maybe it's a candy that's kind of considered a classic, but the company's not doing very well. And we look at the balance sheet, and we see that their intangible asset, the thing that they value their trademark at, is very high, right? They say, people really know what this candy is. They love it, right? But the company's not doing well. And a company buys that company. They can use that logo. Like, let's say, what's a candy that everybody likes? Yeah?
Well, it's not. It's a specific example. It's not Ho-Hos. It's the Twinkies.
Twinkies. That's a great example. Yeah. Twinkies. Twinkies might, the Hostess company, whatever, maybe not doing very well as a business, but a company that wants to buy them says, look, we get the Twinkies trademark. We can turn the Twinkies, we could turn a profit on Twinkies. Everybody knows Twinkies. And they buy the trademark. Yeah, that's a great question. Patents are big, for instance, in the pharmaceutical industry, right? What's that? The EpiPen? Yeah. Yeah. He said EpiPens. Can anybody think of another pharmaceutical product that seems to have been around forever? What's that? Insulin.
Like different companies can create inhaler.
An inhaler. Okay.
One company has a patent on like the pumps you can use, but I don't think they have the pumps on.
Okay, all right, let's put it aside. EpiPen's a great example. EpiPen's a great example. That patent has to be continuously renewed. It's worth a lot of money. It's the basis of their profitability. They don't make money or they don't make as much money unless they're the only company that gets to make the EpiPen, right? It's an intangible asset and it's worth a lot of money. Anybody have any questions about brand popularity and cultural presence? A lot of times on a balance sheet, this is described by a kind of weird phrase, goodwill. Goodwill. But think about sort of the reasons why a brand catches on that maybe the company is not exactly responsible for. It's kind of catching on in the culture. A lot of people on social media are wearing these shoes or something. It's non-product placement related advertising kind of stuff. It's the stuff that the company didn't pay for, right? It's like if a celebrity is wearing a thing and eating a thing and they get a picture taken of them and they weren't paid to do it, and that becomes a reason why people buy that product, that's what's meant by goodwill. Yeah.
But that's not something that you can like sell.
That is not something you can sell necessarily, but it exists, right?
Okay. It's
Doesn't
something
it?
That's like beneficial to the company.
Yeah, and they try to do an evaluation of what they think that's worth.
If 90% of the makeup bloggers on YouTube are all telling you to buy the same makeup, what's that do with popularity?
Yeah.
When they sell the company, they just kind of like throw it out there that they have a cultural presence.
Yeah, it's their goodwill. And we should be a little suspicious of this evaluation or this appraisal, this estimation of what the company thinks their brand awareness is. It's a little bit obviously more difficult to calculate because it's intangible. It's not something that they paid for, as in a copyright they pay to renew.
Why did Nike buy Converse? What is, I mean, Converse. When you see a Converse All-Star logo, what do you associate it with? Do you think of Nike? No.
It's a classic.
It's a classic. It's
Classic.
An absolutely classic line of shoes.
Yeah. It's like, when we think of American auto manufacturers, like we sort of associate them with American history and culture, correct? Right? I know like a lot of people dump on Ford and all this and that, but why are they such a persistent brand, Kyle?
Because they were the first ones that created
Right, yeah, they have cultural significance, right? It's not something that they necessarily bought, right? Yeah, first assembly line, right? We associate that with the Industrial Revolution, with the expansion of the American economy, etc. Maybe if Kyle's an influencer and he's driving a Dodge and he takes a lot of pictures of himself off-roading in a Dodge, you're an influencer. Brand awareness. Current assets. I should have put this up here earlier, but I did not, so I will write it on the screen. One type of current asset that you will find on a balance sheet is, of course, cash. It's the money the company has. Other ones would be your inventory, things you have not sold, and the things that you have technically sold but haven't received money for. Somebody give me an example of a company they've invested in.
AMD.
What do they do?
Computer processors.
They sell computer processors, and they go into, people buy them individually, install them, or more likely they become component parts in other manufactured goods? Both? Okay, so let's say that they sell a bunch of these AMD processors to, give me a computer manufacturing company. Dell. Let's say they sell a ton of these to Dell, and they know they're getting the money in less than a year. It's just that Dell doesn't have it on the books for them yet, right? It's not a straightforward exchange. There's a little lag. But it's on their books as an asset. They say, we know we're getting it. Do any of you all shop at the Coffee Connection? Yeah. There's that wall of shame wherein if you don't have money, you could put your name on there, right? And John knows that you're going to come in and pay. He knows he made a sale, right? But he doesn't have the cash yet, right? So assets are those things that essentially you expect to turn into cash or to become cash in less than a year. Let's talk a little bit about liabilities. Obviously, this is not a convenient scale, but these are the things that companies owe. And when you look at liability, when you look at balance sheets, you want to kind of focus on a few things. Big expenses would be things like accounts payable. Just like accounts receivable, the money that you have for selling things that you don't have yet because you haven't been paid for it, accounts payable are the things that you know you will have to pay, or maybe that you have paid, right? And those would include raw materials. Those would include potentially things like paying all of your workers and your workers' benefits, your bills, your utility bills. There are all kinds of things you would owe money for, right? That you're paying money out for. Another thing to look at on the balance sheet and liabilities is total debt